This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. You are in the right place if you're a human, because I've got the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Bryan Kramer, author of Human-to-Human and the Human-to-Human Guy. You're one of my favorite humans to begin with. How are you, my friend?
Thank you. I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. I'm happy to be sitting here talking with you.
So you popularized the term, and you have this fantastic book out there that is a must-read, the Human-to-Human book. Tell us about how that came to be and sort of your professional journey that brought you to write that book, and then we'll springboard from there into the present day.
Sure. Yeah. That was now a little over 5 years, 6 years ago, in between 5 and 6 years. And what happened is my wife and I owned an agency for 17 years called PureMatter. We focused on all kinds of fun things here in San Jose, California, on really fun brands. And one day I started creating these video series. It was an in-person kind of Charlie Rose, black background, really fun, intimate interviews. And I interviewed all these wonderful executives all over the Bay Area and, brought them in. And I felt like I was getting to have this really wonderful masterclass with all these great people. And there was a theme throughout all of those interviews of there needed to be more humanity in what we're doing because we're starting to automate everything. And this is when social media was first born, and when social was happening, communication changed, which really isn't that long ago when social media actually first came on the scene. So the book and the idea came from that. And I spoke on stage one day at Bloomberg, I gave a keynote, and randomly, not randomly, the topic actually resonated to the point where the audience said, go back to that last slide, took a picture of exactly what now the book title is. And it trended for the next 48 hours at 120 million impressions. And I realized, okay, I'm on to something here, obviously. So it took us about 4 days between then and when I released my next book, which was that. So Shareology, my second book, ended up getting shelved. And I went back and I wrote this surprise baby book. And that did incredibly well as well, which I'm so thankful for. And then from that point forward, I needed to define what H2H meant more. It's changed over the years. It means something totally different than when I first wrote the book. But that's basically how it came to be.
So just in case people have been hiding under a rock, this is a very creative twist. People say, well, Bryan, our business is B2C, right? We have a business to consumer business. And other of your clients would come to you and go, well, Bryan, I'm not sure that's going to work because we're B2B, we're business to business. And so human to human is about connecting as people, because of course people buy. Corporations don't buy, buildings don't buy, entities don't buy. It's always a human being or a set of human beings who decides to say yes to a marketing pitch or to a sales transaction. When that first was popularized, and like you said, it took off like wildfire, and you had to sort of define it above and beyond, oh, it's just one slide. I thought it'd be kind of something clever to say. How did you build that thought leadership platform around that clever moniker so that you could flesh it out and put a lot of your practices and principles that you've always been doing under that umbrella?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the good news is that I've been writing about it for the previous 10 years, and we've been presenting that exact topic. It's just the timing of when it took off, not the start to when I started talking about it. So it looks like it became an overnight success in the topic. It actually wasn't. It was something that I've had so much content and so many things that I'd done to build the content side of the platform that when it was time for it to be received, there's no way I could have written a book in 4 days had I not written about it for the previous, years. And so with the help of my wife, we edited and stitched together everything that I'd already written. It was already defined, and it already came out of everything that we'd done research and studies on. We were ahead of the curve. Thank God we had it all there and ready to go. But that's basically, it was a really nice coincidence meets fate, how all these things converge into that. And then out of that, we just basically, the idea of H2H is it's built on these 3 pillars: simplicity, empathy, and imperfection. And if you have all three, you can be a human company. So yes, it is about B2B or B2C, but at the end of the day, it's about how we feel as humans at the other end. We don't care about what it is that we're buying it from. We care about who we're buying it from, like you said. And if we feel like there is simplicity, empathy, and imperfection, we are that much closer to the brand.
I want to ask you, because this is so fantastic, and thank you for breaking it down to those key ingredients. I'm sure a lot of the big companies that you work with, the big marketing teams, the big executive teams, they say, well, okay, we have a whole bunch of humans here. Who's the human? Like, how are we going to pick the face and the voice of this brand or of this product or of this initiative? Does some of this then overlap with personal branding and making some of the executives, maybe the C-suite executives, maybe just some of the sales team and some of the sales leaders, making them the human face and human voice of the brand, even with these mega Fortune 500 corporations that are your clients?
Absolutely. Hands down, absolutely. You nicely started out saying that people connect with people, other people. And when we think about an organization, if I were to throw out an organization, if I were to say Apple, you'd probably say Tim Cook because, his presence. And the feeling of Tim Cook is that now that feeling that you take on in an emotional connection to Apple, where before Steve Jobs had a much different feeling than Tim Cook does. And that was the feeling that you then attach to Apple. Two totally different people, two incredibly smart people, and two totally different feelings. So think about that in how that personal brand or an individual can impact how people connect into a brand. Absolutely. Building up your evangelists, your rock stars, your engagers, your community drivers, all of these people that are willing to step on the front line and have a voice. Those are the people that we need to develop.
Now, if you're the CEO or the CMO or the chief revenue officer, whatever, it might fall to you. But I imagine that as you're working with some of your clients and as you're doing some of your coaching and consulting, some of your clients might turn to you and say, well, Bryan, I don't want to make this about me, right? This is about the company. This is about our technology. This is about our amazing products. In fact, I want to make the clients or the customers the hero of the story. I don't want this to be me. Can't I just go back in my office and sit behind my computer and tap away on my spreadsheets? I don't want to be in the spotlight. I don't want to be in the limelight. I'm not the hero of the story. What's your comeback should they say something like that to you?
You're probably not the right person to be the evangelist for this company. That's obvious. And you will need one. You'll need somebody who's willing to step up and be that person. Every company needs a voice. If they don't have a voice, they don't have leadership. And if you don't have leadership, you don't have direction or vision or any of those things. So that is critical to have. And any company that doesn't believe that it needs that is definitely going to suffer in that one category. Now, that's not to say that the customer isn't the hero. The customer is the hero of the story because it's whether you're fulfilling your promise on your product or service and how is that affecting your customers. And hopefully it's making them money or increasing something around something that you promised them. And so, yes, you also want to make them the hero. You also want to make your influencers your hero. There are a lot of people out there that are standing at the rooftops shouting your name off the highest peaks and they're going nowhere. It's not being heard. There's nothing being said. So how do we gather what everybody's saying, the customer, the influencer, the internal employee, your advocate, your board, your chairman of your board, all the way down to the person at the front desk. Everybody has a voice and everybody matters and it needs to be heard. And how do you make everybody the hero in their respective places?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, talk a little bit about, I know that you mentioned that you swapped out the Human-to-Human book with the Shareology book, but then the Shareology book came out second. A lot of this seems to be about social media and how, not just social media, but social media and then how ideas and products and recommendations spread from one person or one company to another. So how to build an online reputation, how to build a quote unquote brand, which is the perception of a company and their products and services. How do these two concepts of the human connection, the human story, the human communication that you're so brilliant at helping your clients with, and whether or not that company's products or services are more shareable or less shareable? How do those two connect?
Yeah, it was a happy accident, I guess, when H2H came first before Shareology, because it actually set Shareology up in a much better way than I had originally intended. H2H became the art and Shareology became the science. So H2H is much more the why. Why do we need more humanity injected into everything that we do? And Shareology is the how. How do we now take that feeling and our core competency and the way our tone and our overall humanity and what we offer and inject that into organizations that will then, how is that going to get shared out? And so Shareology ended up becoming more the science behind the what, where, when, how, and why people and brands share. And I boiled it down to some very specific things that matter that can affect an entire campaign or a company's mission on what it is that we share. And I can make that a spoiler alert for anybody who wants it, which is when we share things, we are equal to or more than those things that we share. What that means is we are what we share. That people identify with us as to how and what we share. So if I were going to go share starting tomorrow about money every day for the next 6 weeks, then people are going to start to think that I am more invested in money as a category and how finance can help and how I can help and what I'm more about. And we can change the perception of how others see us in a good way, not in an evil way, but in a good way of saying this is now where I'm focused. And so a lot of times I think we tend to share, things that aren't in our best interests on how others perceive us. We can change that by changing and altering the degree as to what we share.
Hey, good looking. Are you currently getting paid to speak? Would you like to ramp that up? We can help. Book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team at doitmarketing.com/call, and let's see what we might do together. The call is free, but the results may be priceless. And also in the book, you mentioned there's a very interesting whole, like you said, science behind sharing. And I'm thinking about some of the mistakes that we make. So you talk about timing when you share something, how much you share, testing. You talk about the TMI factor where it's a little bit of oversharing. What kind of mistakes do you still see companies and brands make in those kind of what not to do categories?
So a lot of this also works offline, not just online. It's, really how do we share as humans, right? Like how do we converse back and forth with each other? The biggest ingredient that's missing that I find most of the time is listening. Right now, there's a lot of chatter. There's more chatter, I think, than there's ever been when you look at data and you see all the stuff that's going on right now. I mean, it's just endless. But when you receive something that has more of an active listening ingredient to it, we tend to pay more attention. There's a difference between listening and active listening. Active listening is where you're hyper-focused in on what somebody's saying and maybe even personalizing your response. Listening is just where you reply back and say, thank you, I hear you, I see you. So it takes listening to the next level. It really makes it much more personalized to the other person, making them feel like you care. And that level of humanity of caring for another person through sharing, through active listening, that's something that anybody can get started on right now. And you would make more connections than you may just simply by responding and saying thank you.
I think there are certain experts that are much better at this intuitively than others. So you look at someone, our friend Chris Brogan, right? When you show up online as that empathetic, deep listener, you customize your response. I mean, you genuinely have online conversations. You've got conversations, you've got relationships that are building. And people say, oh, well, yeah, Chris is really good at that because that's who he is. And then they tend to kind of put folks like you and folks like Chris into a box going, well, they're special unicorns and that doesn't scale. And that wouldn't work for IBM. That wouldn't work for Bank of America. That wouldn't work for Comcast, whatever, because they're not Chris Brogan. They're not Bryan Kramer. They're not whoever. But it's learnable, isn't it? I mean, it's not like, oh, Bryan Kramer's a real sweet guy and he's really nice and he's really kind and he's really generous. Well, I guess I can't teach our people to do that. What are some behaviors like when you're hired to consult, when you're coaching these teams? Is there an element of, listen, you got to be just a better human being. You can't pretend to care. You got to really care. You can't pretend to listen. You got to really listen and then respond appropriately. So it's almost like you're teaching them how to have people skills in public. How does that work? And how do you unpack that perhaps for a cynical or jaded executive team?
Mm. So first of all, if you can't share offline, then good luck online. So there is an element to what you're talking about to where our sociability as people really needs to come first. And that takes training. My favorite thing to do, quite frankly, is just to get around a table and make people talk to each other. And I give them a topic that they might be faced with and make them actually do it out loud face to face in a real scenario, but do like online scenarios that would be applicable so that they can talk about face to face. If you can do that around a table, then you can do that online. That's the hardest part. What we expect them to do, though, is just go online and start engaging because we think, well, this is easy. All you do is just reply and say, no problem, let me take care of that, or let me take care of that for you. But that's not the level of active listening that we're talking about. So arm them through exercise and practice. The other thing is, I think, around your how do you get an executive to see how a team can come together and the effects that it makes. You can track all of this now. Create the KPIs that are going to make a difference so that you can see everything and how it's affecting your organization from day one. My favorite KPI is engagement, not clicks. It's not opens. It's not click-throughs. It's not any of that. It's engagement. Because if you have true engagement, then your sales will go up. If you have true engagement, your support ticketing will go down. If everything is around engagement, you're actually focused on a human-driven organization, not a data-driven organization. So that's where most executives get caught up. They're being faced with, how do I get more click-throughs? How do I get more conversion? No, you're asking the wrong question. It should be, how do I get more engagement? That's where you should start.
This also touches on building a community around your brand, around your ideas, around your mission, around your value proposition. And I know there's an awful lot of buzz, and there's a lot of buzz about all of these topics, of course. One person I heard, and I forget who it was, but they said community is the new content. So forget about pumping out more blogs, more videos, more things. Build a community of people who are interested in that topic or in that initiative, or they're interested in going to a certain destination, and help them get there. Help them get there. Faster, better, smarter, shorter, in a more secure path. You be the trailblazer, you be the pathfinder, and help that community of people get to an outcome that they already know they want. How does community building, looking at current landscape, 2019, 2020, it seems to me that we are more connected than ever, but we're terrible at connecting. So how do we get better at the connection building, the real relationship building, and this community building idea to help our customer base and our prospect base humanize and get to an outcome that they really want?
Communities are everything. It's such an incredible place to start for an organization. And people say, well, we don't have a community yet. How do we build one? Well, guess what? You have people. There are people out there that are waiting to be asked. Everybody wants to belong to something bigger than themselves. Every single human wants to belong to something bigger than themselves. And everybody wants to believe in what it is that you have to offer. And they want to be taken along for the ride. So if you can take them in and actually give them some inside knowledge and make them an advocate, make them an influencer, make them a futurist over your brand, give them the tools and knowledge that they need to be able to help you grow it. So how do you take people along? Well, for example, we did a campaign, the first influencer campaign for IBM, where we invited 30 people that were not influencers yet, but they were about to be. We used their own tool, Watson, and we did a scour of all this data and figured out 30 people that were on the rise and just about to be influencers in this topic of a new way to work. And we invited them to New York and we gave them an in-person experience, and we had it in this awesome loft, and we had video cameras and reality TV crews and whiteboards and massage therapists and all of this stuff. And then we invited them to help create the future of work. So the entire day that we orchestrated, they were the focus, and they were going to help IBM figure out what does the future look like. And at the end of the day, we walked out with 6 months worth of content, ebooks like you can't believe, 500 pieces of content. And guess what? Their name was on all of this stuff because they wrote it, they talked it, they created it. So now they're emotionally invested in sharing this with everybody else. We put it back into the system over the next 6 months, and they created 500,000 new product demonstrations simply from using the power of voice of others. That's how you take a small community. That's just a micro community of 30 people who created 2 billion impressions in 1 year. That's the power of community. Now, the magic ingredient to that whole thing is bring them in and make them a part of your brand and give them an experience that they'll never forget. And then let the magic take over.
I'm wondering, Bryan, as speakers and consultants and thought leading executives that are listening to this, they go, well, that's IBM. And IBM has this big, gigantic, huge budget, and they can pay Bryan zillions of dollars, and they can bring in these 30 people, and they can engineer this entire wonderful experience. What do you think the minimum viable product of that idea might be if we want to do this for our coaching company, our consulting company, our agency, like you used to run the kind of the agency model before dedicating everything to speaking and coaching and consulting? What can we do without a $1 zillion budget that would be parallel to that idea and that would have tremendous impact on that small number of folks that we want to help?
Same concept, different environment. Bringing people in is the point. When you're going to a conference, then ask everybody if they'd be okay getting there a day before. Rent a room and give them an experience. Attach yourself onto something where people are going to be and create something out of that. But do it in a way that they're going to get some value and you're going to create equal value for both parties. This is going to be something that serves them maybe even a little more than it serves yourself. And out of that, you can still create the exact same thing. I gave you the IBM example, but this scales across every organization at every level, from a one-person organization to a $500 million company. I mean, it's really scalable. The idea is bring everybody in and give them something where they can participate in developing the future of something, creating something together. That's the magic of what humans can do together.
Co-creating and collaborating on something really cool that they're all invested in.
Totally.
What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Well, let me go behind the curtains, because part of what we do here on the Speaking Show, obviously tapping into your brilliance, tapping into your content, tapping into your expertise, but then also kind of looking at how you've evolved as an entrepreneur yourself. I know the speaking business and the writing business, it can have its ups and downs, and some of the ups can be followed right away with some of the downs, then some spectacular ups again right away. How have things evolved for you over the course of this past 6, 7, 8 years that you've been speaking, coaching, writing these fantastic books? And what were some of the lessons learned along the way?
Well, a lot of change, first of all. You and I were at a mastermind at Scott Olford's event, and that was really pivotal. I got a chance to, over stuff like that, over the course of a year, rediscover what it was that I wanted to evolve into. At times it was scary because I didn't know what that was. And at other times it was really mind-boggling that I actually came across something that I ended up actually loving more than anything I've ever done before. I owned 2 agencies, the last one for 17 years, and I got so burned out that I realized that I needed to fire myself from the agency, transitioned into what I do now, which is executive coaching and marketing team coaching and entrepreneur coaching. And I help people grow. I help them grow their revenues, but I don't focus on the revenue. I focus on their brand, their message, and again, in the humanity of it, of their simplicity, empathy, and imperfection, and how they can create their platform so that they can continue to thrive. And that just, to me, that gives me so much joy. I walk off every phone call like high-fiving the wall, because I'm like, oh my God, this is so much fun. If somebody was here, I would do that too. But I just absolutely enjoy serving others. And, when you get to serve others and wake up every morning and say, okay, who do I get to meet with today? And how do I get to help them grow? And how can I help them walk away and be really fulfilled? That's what I'm doing now. And I'm just loving it.
And then also, I know you do a lot of keynotes and a lot of corporate and association speaking. Talk about how that has evolved along with the rest of your business.
I'm speaking now about 30 to 40% of my time. I flipped it a little bit because my health 3 years ago had dragged down. I ended up getting overweight and I got diabetes, and my whole balance was off. I'm happy standing here today to say that I reversed it all. I lost 60 pounds. I don't have diabetes anymore. And I'm healthier and happier than I've ever been. And because of that, I'm only speaking 30 to 40% of the time. And I still love the stage. The stage is my home. It is just absolutely, like yourself and everybody, I'm sure, who takes your programs knows, it's just such a magical place to be giving and just like pouring your heart over the audience and creating and co-creating whatever the content is. I'm speaking mostly about H2H still, but H2H has changed from when I wrote the book to what it is now. So now I talk about it in terms of augmented reality, artificial intelligence, virtual intelligence, virtual reality, automation, email automation, all of these things that are coming that are starting to create a robotic-like infrastructure. And how are we going to get out and actually make a difference with little human touch points in there that makes a difference? So that's what I'm spending most of my time talking about. And then I'm starting to work towards more content actually around leadership and how that's changed and how it's going to change.
Going back into the leadership mode for a quick second, so many companies of all sizes are now virtual, right? Distributed workforce. They meet on Zoom. There's not a lot of face to face, but we have to keep the human to human. How has that management and leadership role evolved? And is that also part of what you're looking at with so many teams and companies going virtual?
So what I think is that we are creatures of habit of thinking that we have to make big shifts. As leaders, we think that if it's not a big shift, then it's not going to make a big difference. And so I believe that and this is part of the work that I'm looking at now, which is how do you create little shifts that make big differences? I think that there are these big tools. Every company is over automated or they have too much technology. I mean, if you look at some of these companies' tool stacks, they've got like 10 pieces of software that all kind of do the same thing and different things at the same time, and nobody's using any of it fully. And they're forgetting that we can walk in and actually participate in the human conversation that's way more powerful than the automation that's going on. And so how do we make these little shifts of creating scalability around conversation? How do we make little shifts around creating a team that can create campaigns faster through Agile? There are little shifts across the board that can be made that make huge differences. I'm a big believer that everybody's on overload right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If their brains aren't already exploding, then the next email that comes in, the next project, the next client who leaves, it's going to throw them into a tailspin and then just
Yeah.
add more crazy to their already crazy lives. Talk a little bit about, I know that you've got sort of a membership or a continuity program, correct? How
Yep.
did that get added into the mix, and how are you finding time or making time to keep that going at the same time that you're out busy speaking and coaching with your clients? And how do we keep all those balls in the air?
Good question. I'm not sure if I have the total answer to that. Some of it is waking up and saying, here we go. But the other part of it is that I've organized my time so that coaching is roughly 50%. The group coaching and workshopping and executive is about 40%. And then my speaking is that 20 or 30%, however that all works out. And so I actually arranged it this time so that I'm only working about 10 to 15 days a month with all of that. So I'm actually not working as hard as I used to, but I am putting more quality effort into the time that I get to spend with people. I'm more focused and more present with them because of the way that I've arranged it. I used to work 50 and 60 and 70-hour work weeks, and now I'm working 20, 30 hours a week on all of this. And it really actually gives me more time to be creative and more time to build and more time to go speak and do all these other things. So it's actually not that bad compared to what it used to be.
Well, such a far-ranging, fantastic conversation. I'm going to ask you two final questions as we wrap up here. The final question is going to be, how do people get connected and stay connected to more Bryan Kramer brilliance? But even before we get to that, if people were to take one central idea from our conversation today, what would you hope that one central idea might be?
I would say inject more human touch points in everything that you do. We can't scale humans. We can't scale ourselves. We know that. We only have a certain amount of hours in our day. But what we can do is we can make a difference in somebody else's day at the right time in the right place. So walk over to your whiteboard and just simply drop on the whiteboard all the different things that you're doing in all of your marketing activities. And then take a step back and look at it and say, where can I be more human? That's it. If you do anything out of this entire discussion, just do that. And you will quickly discover that there are so many different opportunities out there to make a difference in other people in their lives.
Wow, very, very powerful. And I love that operative question about, okay, in all these places, what can I do to be more human? Totally fantastic. All right. I know people are dying to get their hands on the book and the coaching and the programs and the website. And we're going to tie up all these links that Bryan's going to share under the show notes on this episode at thespeakingshow.com. But Bryan, where can we send people so they can get connected and stay connected to more Bryan brilliance?
Thanks, man. You can go to Bryan Kramer, Bryan with a Y, Kramer with a K.com. And that has connection points for absolutely everything that we talked about. And I'll make an offer to your audience if they would like an assessment for them or a strategy session. I'm more than happy to do that for free as part of the listeners of your show. So if you go to coaching, there's a little form you can fill out there and just note that you heard me on this show so I know that's where you're coming from. And then we can make that promise happen. If you go to bryankramer.com, it has all my social media connections, my newsletter, everything's there.
All the good stuff.
All the things.
All right, Bryan Kramer, Mr. H2H. And by the way, I just want to say one more thing. I don't think we give enough credit to the originators and the popularizers. Because if you look in the landscape, and I'm sure this kind of drives you a little bit crazy, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is now talking human to human this, human to human that. Some are even using H2H. Is this keeping your lawyers busy, or do you just kind of open source that and say, hey, listen, God bless, the more this movement spreads, the better?
Competition is good. And so if they're out there using it, I actually don't mind as much. I get a lot of people sending it all in to me, though, saying, hey, check this out. I do own the copyright H2H, actually. So it is owned by me. And I don't have enough money to go after, nor do I have the time or the inclination to go after anybody. There's certain times and places where it's totally useful and they're thriving off of it. And I love it. That's what it's about. It's like, who am I if I'm not human about sharing humanity in this concept with everybody else, right?
Exactly. Well, I just wanted to give credit and give 100% clarity that we are dealing with the original right here. Bryan Kramer, I appreciate you, my friend. Great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.